It was because of the excessive number of unwanted and neglected children. Because children were sleeping in haystacks, begging in the streets, stealing eggs from chicken coops and milk from doorsteps. Because children were too afraid to go home to volatile, abusive situations. Because many parents were unable to provide a home, oftentimes leaving babies crying wrapped in dirty sheets on the doorsteps of the wealthy. Because there was little or no help, no public institution to provide physical or emotional care for the homeless and orphan children. Because there was a need. In the fall of 1907, Reverend O.P. Christian of the National Children's Home Society wrote to Governor Frank R. Gooding asking for help in establishing a Children's Home Society in Idaho. Governor Gooding recognized the need for providing assistance to Idaho's neglected children and offered to help. Idaho has abundant provision for the criminal child, Gooding wrote in his return letter, but has neglected that class of children that has not yet become criminal. In 1908, with the promised support of the governor, the tireless efforts of Mr. Christian, and the help of prominent social workers and compassionate Idaho citizens, the Children's Home Finding and Aid Society was created. Cynthia Mann, a local educator and children's activist, donated the block of land that the home was built on and where it still stands today on Warm Springs Avenue. Christopher W. Moore, a pioneer and co-founder of the First National Bank of Idaho, provided much-needed funding for what would become the current Children's Home building and continued to donate annually, including purchasing and planting ornamental trees to beautify the grounds and leaving a final endowment upon his death which would benefit the children of the home for many years to come. In addition to Mann and Moore's support, numerous individuals from the community gave generously to ensure the fruition and sustainability of the Children's Home and its services. The results of the community's philanthropy were inspiring. On July 22, 1908, the first receiving home opened in an existing cottage on the property. 1 week later, the first child arrived. Kids who had nowhere to go, who had suffered mentally and physically, who simply were not afforded the luxury of being a kid, now had a place to call home and a future to live into. Based on the need for more room to house more children, fundraising efforts for a larger building continued. And in December of 1910, the new building for the Children's Home, which currently stands on Warm Springs, opened its doors. The children of the orphanage were off the streets, out of the saloons, no longer homeless and no longer subject to the abuse many had endured. They were fed, clothed, and nurtured. They were enrolled in public schools like the neighboring Roosevelt Elementary School. Many joined the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and all were provided both physical and mental care. Over the years, as legislation in Idaho shifted, so did the services provided by the Children's Home. In 1966, Idaho's state legislation enacted the foster care system, making the care of orphan children a state responsibility. This dramatically shifted the Children's Home's role in caring for Idaho's abandoned children. Moving away from being an orphanage, the home adopted out its final child in 1968, 60 years after welcoming its first child through its doors. No longer an orphanage, the Children's Home was now an organization in search of direction. The home's purpose, to serve kids, would always remain. The question was how. The years 1966 through 1975 were affectionately referred to as the soul-searching years at the Children's Home. Soul-searching that focused, as it always had, on how to best serve Idaho's children in need. During this period of time, with the help of Boise State faculty members, an exhaustive statewide study was conducted to determine the most pressing needs of Idaho's children. What they discovered was a lack of available behavioral and emotional health care services. Thus, a new beginning arose for the Children's Home Society. In 1975, the Children's Home officially opened the doors to Warm Springs Counseling Center, a counseling center providing exceptional services for kids and their families. For more than 3 decades, the Children's Home Society's Warm Springs Counseling Center has served thousands of children with a full spectrum of emotional and behavioral health services, regardless of ability to pay. These services include child and adolescent counseling, family therapy and clinical family therapy, testing and diagnostics for learning disabilities, psychological assessments, group therapy, including social skills and behavior groups for boys and girls, therapeutic support groups for mothers of children with autism spectrum disorder, and special groups like the Touchstone program, which provides positive emotional therapy for grieving children and adolescents who have lost a loved one and teaches these kids the skills to manage their feelings.
Before Karen was diagnosed with ADHD, we knew something was wrong, but we had no idea what. I mean, truly, without Warm Springs counseling, we could have gone years without understanding what was holding her back and why she was the way that she was, and by then, it may have been too late. Thankfully, there was help.
Our son spent almost 3 years in foster care. Things had just reached a point where we didn't understand him and his problems, and we didn't handle it very well. He would never have been able to come home if it weren't for the counseling we all got at Warm Springs. He's home now, and things are good, really good.
The Counseling Center is the Children's Home Society's way of continuing its mission to serve Idaho's children by positively affecting the foundations which they grow up and build their lives upon. The Children's Home Society was created by members of this community to meet the needs of our children. More than 100 years later, we continue to serve these kids from all walks of life, through the continued support of our community patrons.